During the imperial selection of consorts, as I aspired to be chosen as the crown princess, the princess suddenly declared that she had been reborn. She is a calamity who defies the virtues of womanhood. In her previous life, my elder brother, the crown prince, suffered greatly because he chose her, leading to his disgrace and the eventual downfall of our nation, leaving him to die without a complete corpse. The emperor, in a fit of rage, ordered my execution by strangulation. In my final moments, the princess leaned closer and whispered in my ear, "Fool, who in this world truly experiences rebirth? This is the consequence of your overestimating your own capabilities and attempting to usurp my crown prince." Upon opening my eyes once more, I found myself back on the eve of the selection. Wasn't it said that no one in this world could be reborn? Yet here I am. My lady, the path ahead is ominous. Let us take a detour. Upon hearing these words, I realized I had been reborn. In my previous life, as the carriage approached the Eastern Palace, we encountered a funeral procession. To seek a favorable omen, I chose to take a different route. However, this very choice marked the beginning of my tragic fate. The refugees, who had long been lying in wait, surged forward and dragged me from the carriage. They seized my hair and tugged at my garments, not in a plea for alms, but as if they sought to strip me bare for public humiliation. Even if I managed to escape unscathed, I was left with a tarnished reputation of impurity. This time, I smirked. There was no need for a detour. I would tread this very path. I was on my way to pay my respects at a grave. How could encountering a funeral procession be deemed inauspicious? At the entrance of the Eastern Palace, Princess Wanla spotted me and furrowed her brow slightly. Clearly, she intended to repeat her actions from my past life by dousing me with foot-washing water. Then, in a condescending tone, she declared, "How could such a filthy and impure individual dare to participate in the selection at the Eastern Palace? I bestow upon you this foot-washing water to cleanse you of your filth. Is this not a grand gift? Why do you not kneel and express your gratitude?" The entrance to the Eastern Palace was bustling with people. Having been ravaged by the refugees on the road, I now faced public humiliation. In my past life, I had lost my composure and hurriedly explained that my servants had rescued me in time, and nothing untoward had occurred. To my surprise, Princess Wanla waved her hand dismissively. The innocent need not explain. Only the guilty feel compelled to do so. I have no time for your lies. As the time for the selection approached, I had no choice but to acquiesce and go for a bath. I believed that as long as I could participate in the selection, all my troubles would be resolved. After all, the current emperor was sworn brothers with my father during his rise to power. Later, my father, in a bid to save the emperor, sustained multiple sword wounds, rendering him unable to stand and forcing him into retirement. The emperor had promised that one day he would become my father's son-in-law. With only the crown prince of appropriate age in the palace, my invitation to the Eastern Palace for the selection was undoubtedly a sign of my future as the crown princess. Little did I know that my compromise, choosing to bathe and change, played directly into Princess Wanla's malicious scheme. After my bath, when I arrived at the Grand Hall, I was already significantly late. The usually gentle crown prince exhibited signs of impatience. The queen's gaze towards me bore a hint of reproach. "My dear girl, you are typically so well-versed in propriety. Why have you arrived so late today?" Before I could speak, Wanla interjected with a sarcastic tone. "What else could it be? Our kind Miss Sue, in her benevolence, disrobed to assist the suffering refugees on her way to the Eastern Palace, and arrived in such a state that her attire was far from proper. I, seeing her pitiful condition, generously permitted her to bathe. Otherwise, I feared her presence would offend the eyes of everyone here." The crown prince's expression darkened, and the queen furrowed her brow. "During today's selection at the Eastern Palace, do not utter such nonsense." She reluctantly pouted. I thought this incident had concluded. But when the crown prince presented me with the peony, a symbol of the legitimate wife, Wanla suddenly collapsed, clutching her forehead. Upon regaining consciousness, the first thing she did was point at me and scream, "Do not come near me. You have already caused my family to fall into ruin. What more do you want? Heaven has eyes. Since I have been given a second chance at life, I shall not allow you to continue harming my family or wreaking havoc upon De Yong." Everyone, including the crown prince, assumed she had fallen into hysteria. Yet, To their astonishment, she accurately predicted a mutiny in the military camp located far away in Shuaizhou 2 hours later. Then, as the crown prince chose me as his consort, she shrieked, "She is a calamity, a harbinger of disaster." In my previous life, the crown prince had chosen her, leading to his downfall and the eventual destruction of our nation, leaving him without a proper burial. If you do not believe me, look at her right waist. There lies a peach blossom birthmark that reveals itself with heat. In my past life, when she betrayed the nation and committed adultery, everyone witnessed it during her public shaming. The crown prince's gaze towards me shifted dramatically. The emperor, having rushed to the scene, offered me no room for debate, presenting me with only one choice: to take my own life in atonement. Failing that, I would be executed. I found Wanla's words utterly ridiculous, for I possessed no such peach blossom birthmark. I implored the emperor for justice. However, when the matron examined me, an inexplicable birthmark appeared on my lower back. The incident involving the refugees dragging me from the carriage had become irrefutable evidence of my promiscuity. Among so many noble ladies vying for selection, why was I the only one to encounter the refugees? Moreover, I had never heard of refugees daring to drag a noble woman from her carriage. How was it that it happened to me? Wanla lifted her chin, her expression one of disdain. It is evident that your very essence exudes debauchery, inviting such men to take advantage. No wonder you will end up in an illicit affair, bringing shame to the crown prince. Just then, a wildfire erupted in the southwestern outskirts of the capital. The royal astrologers determined it was due to a calamity star about to take residence in the Eastern Palace, with the star's birth chart buried beneath the flower bed of the palace. That very chart belonged to me. The emperor, in a fit of rage, executed me without even informing my family. As I lay on the brink of death, I grasped Princess Wanla's sleeve with all my might. I wished to ask her if I had indeed committed such sins in my past life. To my astonishment, she laughed uncontrollably. "Fool! Who in this world has ever been reborn? You brought this upon yourself by overestimating your worth and attempting to claim my crown prince. You deserve it." I was filled with bloodlust, but could utter no further words. Heaven has eyes. Given a second chance at life, I shall teach her the true meaning of rebirth. 3. As consciousness returned, I beheld the murky, foul-smelling foot-washing water. I deftly dodged it, causing it to splatter onto the ground with a resounding splash, capturing everyone's attention. The noble ladies expressed their astonishment. I observed that Miss Sue's hair was slightly disheveled, but she appeared otherwise unblemished. Why does His Highness insist she undergoes grooming and changing? Wanla, typically quick-tempered, sighed. Are you all unaware? Miss Sue was dragged from her carriage by refugees on her way to the Eastern Palace. I ought not to concern myself. Yet today is the Crown Prince's selection. I cannot allow an unclean woman to participate. The term unclean held a double meaning. The gazes of the noble ladies towards me shifted instantly, filled with disdain, schadenfreude, and even sympathy. I queried in astonishment, "If I may inquire, Your Highness, what wrong has this humble servant committed to be labeled as unchaste and unclean, and why may I not enter the Eastern Palace?" Wanla scoffed derisively. "Do you truly believe this princess is unaware of what transpired on your journey? Entangled with a group of filthy men, your conduct is even beneath that of courtesans. How dare you still aspire to be the crown prince's consort? It is truly laughable." I found it equally absurd. If I had indeed been dragged from my carriage by refugees, how could I have arrived at the Eastern Palace so swiftly? Yet Wanla remained blissfully unaware, maintaining her lofty demeanor. Out of respect for our shared gender, I shall not stoop to your level. Simply withdraw from the selection, and I shall persuade my brother to absolve you of your transgressions, even arranging a splendid marriage for you. What say you? Observing her feigned magnanimity, I innocently inquired, "Why does your highness assume that I encountered misfortune on my way to the Eastern Palace? Is it true, as the rumors suggest, that you harbor feelings towards the crown prince that exceed mere sibling affection, thus keeping watch over the candidates?" The noble ladies furrowed their brows at this remark. The entire realm of De Yong was aware that the crown prince and Princess Wanla were siblings born of the same mother, arriving in the world almost simultaneously. Consequently, the crown prince dotes upon Princess Wanla, who possesses an almost pathological possessiveness over him. Any woman who draws near to the crown prince faces severe punishment at her hands. I was the first to expose her thoughts openly before her. Wanla's expression shifted dramatically, and in a flustered tone, she retorted, "What nonsense are you spouting?" She immediately brandished a whip to strike me. It appeared fierce, yet lacked any real force. It was merely an attempt to intimidate me. After all, injuring a noble lady in the Eastern Palace is no trivial matter. I could have easily evaded it, but instead I stepped forward, seamlessly transitioning into treatment for my injuries and preparing for my attire. Wanla, however, interpreted my actions as a sign of guilt and burst into laughter.
Misu.
Do return quickly. Today is your moment of glory. I laughed in response. Indeed, today is your day of triumph. For, as in my previous life, upon entering the grand hall, I inadvertently missed the auspicious moment. The Empress furrowed her brow, reprimanding me for my lack of decorum. Wanla hastily interjected, "Mother, do not blame her." Miss Su, on her way to the Eastern Palace, selflessly aided the disaster-stricken, generously shedding her garments. When I encountered her, she had not yet donned her attire. I found her pitiable and thus permitted her to bathe, which is why she was delayed. Why must the prince shield her? She continued. It is clearly her own indiscretions that led to her being pulled from the carriage by the refugees, and she remains oblivious to the situation, yet still dares to present herself at the Eastern Palace for selection. The speaker was Wanla's devoted servant, the legitimate daughter of the director of the Astronomical Bureau. Knowing that the emperor had specifically summoned me for the selection, she had persistently vexed me. Now, believing she had caught my tail, she arrogantly raised her chin. Ruined reputation is hardly akin to murder or arson. It is not a grave matter. Yet today is the selection, meant to showcase the epitome of womanhood from across the realm. You truly do not deserve to be here. I raised an eyebrow. The epitome of womanhood? If one is human, character should be paramount, and virtue must precede all. I believe I have not tarnished my integrity. How is it that I am deemed unworthy? She faltered, momentarily speechless. After all, while my father may be recuperating at home and lacks real power, he still holds the title of a duke. I am a disciple of a renowned scholar, known for my talents and frequent acts of charity. Even the esteemed head of the institution has praised my benevolence. Who can claim my character is flawed? Indeed, character and virtue are paramount for all, but women must also uphold feminine virtues. Wanla chuckled softly, a rare display of composure. The other noble ladies echoed her sentiments. Yes, a woman's standing is built upon her virtue. The reputation of feminine virtue is paramount, Miss Su, given your situation. You ought to reflect upon your misdeeds and return home without causing further disturbances. I was utterly bewildered. What had transpired? How was I unaware? Wanla sighed dramatically, seemingly at her wit's end. Miss Su, must I spell it out for you? I know you are reluctant to accept this, but the events have unfolded clearly. Instead of stifling the voices of the masses, it would be wiser to reflect on whether your conduct has been too frivolous, resulting in such calamity. I sighed in turn, a visage of profound sorrow. I truly do not know how I have offended the prince to warrant such humiliation. If the prince insists that women should prioritize their virtue, then one should recognize that without evidence, tarnishing another's reputation is a grave offense. Or, do you believe that due to your royal status, you are exempt from adhering to feminine virtues? As my words lingered, silence enveloped the hall, only to be broken by murmurs. Indeed, the princess had spoken at length without presenting any evidence. Was it truly slander? Although she held a noble title, the princess herself had asserted that women must prioritize their virtue, and to maliciously sully another's reputation without substantiation was hardly justifiable. The selection process was not meant to involve matrons or officials. It was Wanla who suggested that the Eastern Palace selection, being of national significance, warranted the presence of such individuals to ensure fairness. Now, all blame fell squarely upon her. She could no longer maintain her facade of decorum and pointed at me, hurling accusations. Wretched woman, even now you remain defiant. This morning, you arrived at the Eastern Palace, disheveled after being pulled from your carriage by a group of refugees, thereby losing your dignity. The entire Flower Street knows of your disgrace, and you dare to feign innocence, demanding that I summon witnesses? Her words stirred a tempest. All eyes turned to me, expressions laden with complexity. After all, the emperor had personally promised a marriage. The selection was merely a formality, and yet here I was, embroiled in such a scandal. Very well. I regarded Wanla with an unperturbed demeanor. Since the princess insists that I have lost my dignity, let us bring forth witnesses. However, should they confirm my innocence, it would be you who has committed slander. How then shall we address such a breach of feminine virtue? Wanla scoffed. If you are innocent, then I shall kneel and apologize. Yet if you are not, you shall crawl from the palace, proclaiming you are unchaste and unworthy of the crown prince. What a malicious wager. Some courtiers voiced their objections. One was a royal princess, the other a scion of a prestigious family. How could such a crude bet be made? If this were to spread, it would surely become a source of ridicule. Yet, after a prolonged silence, the prince finally spoke. Let it be so. I trust Wanla is not of such malice as to tarnish another's reputation. Though he did not mention me directly, his stance was abundantly clear. After all, while my father bore the title of duke, he wielded no true power. He would prefer I face misfortune, allowing him to abandon me without consequence. Everyone kept their distance, observing me with detached eyes. I merely offered a faint smile. Very well. Wanla's delight grew, confident she would ruin my reputation and leave me in despair. Yet soon, her smile faltered. The witnesses she summoned testified that they had never encountered me. Nonsense. How could she not have visited that alley? Seemingly struck by a thought, Wanla gritted her teeth and sneered. I did not expect you to be so unafraid of misfortune. But what of it? You surely bring ill omens. The moment you step out, you encounter a funeral procession. Miss Sue, you are truly a harbinger of bad luck. In my previous life, such an ominous label had been affixed to me, leaving me without recourse. I had not anticipated that this time it would come so swiftly. However, it became clear that the witnesses Wanla had found proved my innocence, revealing her malevolence. To safeguard her own reputation, she was determined to undermine me. The prince frowned, clearly contemplating a defense of Wanla. But I was no mute. I interjected first. The prince is remarkably well informed about my journey to the Eastern Palace. I did not detour to Flower Street to encounter the refugees, yet he asserts with certainty that I was pulled from my carriage. Now he even knows I encountered a funeral procession. What a curious coincidence. One might think the prince had orchestrated both the funeral and the refugees. Since the witnesses summoned by Wanla had affirmed my innocence, the hall fell into a profound silence. When I spoke, the sound was as palpable as a falling pin. The gazes turned toward Wanla were rife with astonishment and trepidation. Predictably, Wanla was about to kneel and apologize. However, the empress, who had remained silent since Wanla began her tirade, suddenly spoke. Enough. It is merely a trivial squabble among young women. The commotion has been made. Let us return to the matter at hand. The prince echoed. Indeed, it is but a minor altercation among girls. Miss Sue has always been sensible. I trust she will not hold a grudge. Everyone exchanged glances, their gazes filled with sympathy for me. There was no further room for misunderstanding. The empress and the prince sought to protect their own. As for me, the unfortunate soul, I could only swallow my bitterness. Wanla cast me a triumphant glance, her malice unabated. Miss Sue, did you hear? It was merely a game. You must be cautious with your life. Perhaps next time, the stakes will be your very existence. I returned her gaze, narrowing my eyes slightly. Then let us see whose life is truly at stake. As in my previous life, the prince extended the peony, a symbol of the position of crown princess, toward me. Before I could reach out to accept it, Wanla suddenly screamed and collapsed to the ground. The prince wasted no time discarding the peony, anxiously cradling Wanla in his arms, disregarding the propriety between men and women. The noble ladies exchanged glances, their expressions growing increasingly complex. They must have come to realize that the waters of the Eastern Palace were murky and treacherous, and stepping in could be perilous. The selection ought to have been halted, yet the empress declared, "Today is an auspicious day as calculated. Who knows when the next will come? Since you are all here, let us wait a while longer." She then cast a meaningful glance in my direction. Watching the physicians come and go without diagnosing her ailment, I could not restrain a laugh. They were truly going to great lengths to contend with me. I certainly could not let them down. Once Wanla regained consciousness and feigned terror while pointing at me, I too would not be outdone, shedding tears profusely. "Your Highness, I know your esteemed self would not wish to kneel and apologize to me, But why resort to such means? The child speaks not of the strange and the supernatural. If such tales incite unrest and shake the very foundations of our nation, what are we to do? Before Wanla could retort, I sighed in resignation. Your Highness, with such esteemed nobility, I never intended to compel you to fulfill your promises. Why must you act in such a manner? Those who grace this court are all seasoned foxes, possessing keen insight into worldly affairs. Although their expressions remain inscrutable, their eyes betray a profound skepticism regarding Wanla's claims of rebirth. Even the prince, who dotes on her, furrows his brow. Wanla, cease this folly. It was as if they wished to state outright that she should abandon the pretense of having been reborn. Wanla's eyes instantly glistened with unshed tears. I have not fabricated this. I truly have been reborn. If you doubt me, observe the birthmark of a peach blossom on my right waist that manifests under heat. Were it not for my rebirth, how could I possess knowledge of such intimate details? She will treat you in such a manner in the future. And you still choose to favor her? The prince remained silent. I understood that his silence did not indicate favoritism towards me, but rather that Wanla had miscalculated her timing in proclaiming her rebirth. Had I genuinely been cast down by the refugees, her words and actions would pose no issue. However, I stood innocent and blameless, while she appeared to harbor ill intentions toward me. Furthermore, her previous failure to honor our agreement rendered her claims of rebirth riddled with inconsistencies. Yet she remained lost in her own world, glaring at me with palpable hostility. Since you are so convinced that I am feigning rebirth, do you dare to let everyone see if you possess a birthmark on your lower back? I fell silent. Wanla seemed invigorated, as if a surge of adrenaline coursed through her. What, do you lack the courage? In the future, you might dare to consort with others, betray a Yong, and engage in treachery with the enemy, yet you lack the audacity to admit your treacherous heart. As she spoke, before I could interject, she commanded the attendants to restrain me. My face drained of color, tears streamed down my cheeks, and I felt wronged. Everything hinged upon the prince's word. I was deemed cast down by the refugees, and now it was claimed that I harbored ulterior motives. What offense had I committed against the prince to incite such hatred? In a public setting, to expose someone's birthmark, even for a condemned criminal, should be deemed unacceptable. The prince repeatedly extolled the virtue of female propriety. Yet was this truly how one upheld such standards? Today, driven by personal desire, you tarnish my reputation and ruin my life. Whom shall you target in the future? The noble ladies, who had previously been indifferent, began to furrow their brows, and the matrons wore expressions of complexity. The prince's actions were indeed inappropriate. Miss Sue is, after all, a young woman of the boudoir. How could she be so publicly exposed? Moreover, the notion of rebirth is exceedingly fantastical, and we cannot be compelled to believe it. Faced with my fall from grace and the absence of power, Wanla could bully and humiliate me at will. However, the matrons were not her to offend. They straightened their backs and spoke softly. I am not speaking in vain. If everyone wishes for me to prove my rebirth, allow me to foretell a recent event. There has been a mutiny in the Shoal military camp this morning, and a calamity shall ensue. The expressions of all present shifted instantly. For Shoal is 100 miles from the capital, and if there were military matters, it would take several hours for news to reach us. The emperor himself has yet to receive any word. How could a sheltered young lady like Princess Wanla possess such knowledge? Wanla was immensely pleased with their reactions, smiling as she said, if news of a mutiny does indeed arrive, it would validate my claim of rebirth. Therefore, if Miss Sue has a birthmark on her right waist, would it not corroborate my assertion that she will consort with others and engage in treachery against the nation? That is indeed so, came a resonant voice, that of the aged Minister Wang. His gaze toward me was filled with pity, yet deeper was the apprehension. The stability of the dynasty should not be taken lightly. If Miss Sue truly harbors the fate of a calamity, she ought to be executed immediately to prevent future misfortune. At that moment, news arrived from outside. This morning, a mutiny occurred in the Shoal military camp, resulting in hundreds of casualties. His Majesty has dispatched generals to quell the unrest. Initially, the hall fell silent, but soon erupted into fervent discussion. Princess Wanla truly possesses the essence of rebirth. De Yong may very well face ruin at the hands of Su Qingshu. She is but a mere woman. How could she wield such power? Did you not hear Princess Wanla? Su Qingshu will consort with enemy generals and commit treason. If she were merely Su Qingshu, nothing catastrophic would occur, but if she were to become the crown princess, we would indeed face calamity.
Indeed.
If heaven has granted us foresight, we must not allow the kingdom to topple and the people to suffer.
Su Qingshu musti.
Wanla stood upon the jade platform, gazing down upon me with an air of superiority. In that case, Miss Su, disrobe so that everyone may see whether you bear the birthmark of a peach blossom. To strip in public to prove my innocence. Even if I were truly pure, I would still be rendered guilty. One matron furrowed her brow and whispered, "These matters have yet to materialize. Miss Su is innocent. If Miss Su lacks the birthmark, yet exposes herself publicly, how shall she live henceforth?"
Indeed.
To verify does not necessitate public exposure. Why not let Miss Su accompany us to the inner chamber for verification? There are enough of us that no favoritism could arise. However, Wanla vehemently opposed this. Her intention was to ruin my reputation. But the Empress made a decisive ruling.
Su Qingshu.
You shall accompany everyone to the inner chamber for verification. Should you indeed possess the birthmark of a peach blossom, do not blame me for my lack of compassion. As I was escorted toward the inner chamber, I brushed past Wanla. She sneered coldly. "Su Qingshu, you are as good as dead." I chuckled in return. "Do not speak too soon, princess. Let us not forget that you still owe me a kneeling apology." Wanla's smile faltered instantly, while mine grew more jubilant. For this time, I sought not merely an apology. Before long, I emerged from the inner chamber alongside the matrons. The Emperor's expression was complex upon seeing me, for it was Wanla's claims of rebirth and her prediction of my disastrous impact on the nation that had drawn attention. "Su, your father saved my life. I ought to treat you well and fulfill my promise of making you the crown princess. Yet, as the Emperor of Deyong, tasked with the safety of the realm, I cannot cling to a single act of benevolence. Should you indeed harbor traits of a calamity, do not blame me for taking your life." Such grandiloquence, wielding the lives of countless subjects as a shield, naturally compelled me to feel trepidation and gratitude. Since childhood, I have studied the classics and adhered to the teachings of my parents, always placing Your Majesty, Deyong, and the welfare of the people at heart. If I were truly a calamity, for the sake of the realm and the populace, I would willingly face death. Those present were moved by my loyalty. Some even remarked, "Such a righteous woman is indeed a paragon for all women. How could she be as shameless as Princess Wanla claims? Could it be that Princess Wanla is lying?" A voice of doubt arose, followed by another. Even amidst the streets and in the wide expanses, where one might feel free and noble, in this grand hall, we are but ants. Who can guarantee that I am not the next victim? Wanla panicked in an instant, exclaiming, "If you truly care for the people, then die right now." Turning to the Emperor, she implored, "Father, execute her swiftly, otherwise, Deyong shall be doomed." The prince also bore a look of reluctance. "Miss Su is innocent. However, Father, concerning the stability of the realm, it is better to err on the side of caution than to let her go." The Emperor looked at me, his eyes briefly closing. "Bring forth the poison." Wanla sighed in relief, yet the next moment, the lady of loyal and brave Duke knelt. Miss Su does not bear the birthmark of a peach blossom. The lady of the Minister of Rights, a first-rank noblewoman, also knelt in submission. "Miss Su does not possess the birthmark of a peach blossom. I have seen it clearly. This concerns the lives of real people. I beseech Your Majesty to reconsider." Wanla was momentarily stunned, disbelief etched on her face. "How is this possible?" She then attempted to lift my clothing, but the Empress commanded her to be restrained. Everyone assumed it was to punish Wanla, yet unexpectedly, the Empress turned to me. "Wanla is but a child, obstinate in her ways.
Miss Su.
Why not allow her to see, so that she may be disabused of her notions?" Once more, I returned to the inner chamber, gazing at my unblemished skin. Wanla's face darkened, nearly contorted with bitterness. "When did you discover this?" I tilted my head. "Oh, dear princess, if you were truly reborn, how could you remain in ignorance? In my previous life, I met my demise due to a birthmark painted upon me by a palace made using a special pigment. In this life, I shall not allow such a fate to unfold. Of course, it was the maid who, while I was bathing, drugged me into unconsciousness, marked me once more, and then stealthily erased it." Wanla's countenance turned ashen, Yet she soon wore a smile. You may have escaped this time, but what of it? If I desire your death, you shall meet it. I was acutely aware that a wildfire had ignited in the southwestern outskirts of the capital. The imperial astrologer, as in my past life, adamantly proclaimed this inferno to be divine retribution, for a calamity star had taken residence in the eastern palace. Its birth chart situated in the southwestern corner of the palace grounds. All eyes turned toward me, as if convinced I was the harbinger of misfortune. The emperor, though his expression remained calm, harbored a palpable intent to kill. Wanla watched me with malicious delight. Su Qingshu, I have warned you, should I wish for your demise. It shall come to pass. When the paper bearing the birth chart was presented, Wanla impatiently commanded that poison be brought forth before me.
Misu.
Out of consideration for our shared womanhood, I am willing to grant you a dignified exit. May you cultivate virtue in your next life and refrain from becoming a malicious woman harboring ill intentions. Yet, everyone regarded her with peculiar expressions, including the crown prince. She remained oblivious, hastily instructing the palace attendants to restrain me. Su Qingshu, I offered you a chance, yet you chose to resist. You refuse the poison? Then seize her and strangle her on my behalf. The attendants exchanged glances, hesitant to act. Wanla, in a fit of rage, shouted, Are you all deaf? Do as I command. If not, you shall take her place. Only then did they approach me. I exhaled deeply, a radiant smile gracing my lips.
Misu.
May your journey be swift. However, in the next moment, a resounding slap struck her face, sending her crashing to the ground, disbelief etched upon her features. Father, why do you strike your daughter? I act for the sake of the dynasty. She continued, that Su Chong, seeking to repay favor, occupied a noble position and dared to propose that I marry the crown prince, encroaching upon the eastern palace. Who knows if that war was not incited by him? Merely to claim a debt of gratitude from you. The emperor's countenance darkened further, and the courtiers exchanged knowing glances, lowering their heads in unison. For it was he, the current emperor, who bore responsibility for that disastrous defeat. His ambition and heedlessness led him to rely on treacherous advisors, disregarding counsel, which resulted in his encirclement. Yet, as emperor, he could not be held accountable. History would record that the scouts had been bribed, betraying the nation and spreading false reports. Audacious! The emperor bellowed, delivering another slap. Wanla, feeling wronged, attempted to argue, but the crown prince suddenly seized her. As if bolstered by newfound resolve, Wanla clung to the crown prince, weeping. Their limbs intertwined, an intimate display. The noble women and courtiers exchanged awkward glances, turning away. The emperor, seething with rage, hurled the paper bearing the birth chart at her face. Little Wu, I believed you merely mischievous. It appears you are indeed a calamity star. If earlier the emperor had shown Wanla some favoritism, now his anger was palpable, as he seemed to wish to abandon this daughter. After all, the heir to the throne cannot bear any blemish. Wanla stared blankly at the paper. There, in stark relief, was her birth chart.
Impossible.
Why is this my birth chart? It is clearly Su Qingshu's. She cried out, Is it you, Su Qingshu? Have you meddled in this? No, I replied, crouching before her, slowly curling my lips into a smile, speaking in a tone only she and I could hear. I switched it. No one has informed you. I continued, esteemed princess, for I have been reborn. Wanla froze, pushing me away with force.
Impossible.
You lie. How can anyone be reborn? I laughed. Why could there not be rebirth? Did you not proclaim yourself reborn repeatedly? Wanla's complexion turned pale, her conscience gnawing at her as she bit her lower lip. What more is there to misunderstand? The elderly minister Wang cleared his throat, his face filled with disappointment. Your Highness, as a noble daughter of the imperial family, you ought to cultivate virtue and propriety. How can you lie about being reborn and slander Miss Su? Given the gravity of the matter concerning the imperial family, most remained silent, unwilling to speak out. However, upon hearing Minister Wang's words, murmurs arose. Indeed, Princess Wanla, you nearly took a life for your selfish desires. Such wickedness does not merit the sustenance of the populace. Some even suggested stripping Wanla of her title and punishing her severely. Yet the Empress rose, shielding Wanla. She is but a young girl who enjoys mischief. This has not resulted in any calamity. Let the matter rest. I shall confine her for reflection. Such a grave issue was once again dismissed by the Empress as mere folly. The Crown Prince added, Wanla was merely startled and fainted. We all witnessed it clearly. It is understandable that she would speak nonsensically upon waking. Why must we press the issue? He then cast a glance at me, his words laced with veiled threats. Miss Sue, I trust you will not be so petty as to hold a grudge against a sickly individual? Once timid and downcast, Wanla lifted her head again, gripping the Crown Prince's arm, her laughter brimming with wild delight. The noble women exchanged glances, their expressions filled with sorrow. Could it be that Miss Sue's aspiration to become the Crown Princess has drawn such ire from the Crown Prince? If so, we would never dare to marry into the royal family. We humbly request the Emperor's permission to return home. Indeed, the Crown Prince's esteemed status and Princess Wanla's noble birth create an impenetrable bond. We are unworthy of such ties. We implore the Emperor to allow us to withdraw from the selection and return home. The noble women echoed their pleas for their daughters. The Empress attempted to interject, but the Emperor's voice thundered, Is this not enough disgrace? Seize her. Princess Wanla's heart is wicked, her tongue full of lies, her conduct detestable. Strip her of her title and demote her to commoner status. The Crown Prince frowned. Father, is such punishment not excessive? The Emperor shot him a cold glance. Do you dare question me? He then turned to me with a tender expression. Dear child, you have suffered injustice. I shall ensure you are compensated. Would you consent to be the Crown Princess? If not, speak of your desires. I shall fulfill them. I smiled coyly. I am indeed unwilling. But what I desire, you would not grant. I glanced at the Crown Prince, feigning shyness, as I bowed deeply. I willingly accept the honor of marrying the Crown Prince as his bride. Wanla's eyes widened in disbelief, her desire to curse me stifled by the Empress's firm grip. She could only plead with the Crown Prince. Yet he remained silent. I chuckled softly, realizing that their so-called sibling bond was not as profound as claimed. On the eve of our wedding, my father's murky eyes glimmered with tears. I am so sorry, my dear. I have failed your mother's trust, unable to protect you. Years ago, when my father lay gravely injured, my mother devoted herself entirely to caring for him for 3 years. When he finally regained consciousness, her health had deteriorated, and shortly thereafter, she passed away. I clenched my fists. My father has wronged me not. Those who have wronged us shall pay in blood. My father hesitated, wishing to speak. I grasped his frail hand. Father, I know your old comrades worry for you and wish to visit, but you fear the current emperor and dare not approach them. Now that I am to enter the palace, I require your support. Wanla, as a daughter, could not comprehend matters of the military, nor could she expose the imperial astrologer as deceit. Thus, in my past life, I truly believed she had been reborn. Only at the moment of my death did I realize I was not the only target. My father remained silent for a long while before gripping my hand in return. Only then did I feel a sense of peace as I departed. On our wedding night, the Crown Prince stood 3 paces away, his demeanor icy. I harbor no romantic feelings towards you, be it of a male or female nature. If you possess any sense, you shall remain compliant within the Eastern Palace. Otherwise, do not blame me for taking your life. The following day, I returned with a woman of striking beauty, referred to as a lady-in-waiting, yet in truth, she was merely a maid. Nevertheless, this maid adorned herself in gold and jewels, exuding an air of haughtiness. She regarded me with unabashed malice. Even if you were to marry the Crown Prince, what of it? He shall forever remain my brother, as long as I reside in the Eastern Palace. You shall not experience a single moment of peace. I merely smiled. Time is on our side. The outcome of our rivalry remains uncertain. With Wanla sowing discord, the Crown Prince's aversion towards me deepened. Yet, I remained ever gentle and considerate, laboring tirelessly without complaint. Not only did I maintain order within the Eastern Palace, but I also assisted him in resolving numerous external troubles. Even the once neutral general, renowned for his valor at the frontier, I successfully brought under his command. Let alone the other predicaments he encountered, I never sought recognition nor reward for my efforts. Eventually, I noticed a change in the way he regarded me. After a quarrel with Wanlo, he drunkenly stumbled into my chamber. I longed to strangle him, yet I could only endure, for I needed a child that belonged solely to me. The following day, upon waking, he struck me across the face without mercy. You drugged me. How could you stoop so low? I offered no explanation, merely revealing the bruises on my neck and the marks on my wrist. It was indeed his coercion. His expression shifted. Yet he did not apologize and departed in silence. Despite such humiliation, I bore no resentment, continuing to serve him with soup and assisting in garnering support from noble women and merchants. After another altercation with Wan Lo, he burst into my room and embraced me tightly. When will she ever understand like you do? She knows full well that, even without blood ties, I cannot marry her. Why does she persist in this torment? I was taken aback. Realizing his slip of the tongue, he hastily offered a few words of comfort before leaving. From then on, he treated me with greater kindness, showering me with rare gifts and occasionally finding time to accompany me. Wan Lo, however, caused yet another ruckus, barging into my quarters with a sword in hand. Observing her haggard face and deranged demeanor, I felt a sense of satisfaction, mimicking her once lofty disposition. What impertinent maid dares intrude upon my abode? Seize her. Naturally, none dared to act against her. Yet Wan Lo appeared deeply humiliated, heedless of consequences, swinging her sword at me. It is you, wretched woman, who has taken the crown prince from me, robbed me of everything. If only you were dead, all would be well. As I caught sight of the crown prince approaching, I wiped my tears and stepped toward the sword. I cherish you, your highness, and you are the most important person to me. Naturally, I do not wish to see you in sorrow. If my death brings you joy, then what harm is there in my demise?
Wan le hésita-t-elle.
The sword pierced my shoulder, blood gushing forth. The crown prince rushed to support me, casting a cold glare at Wan Lo. Have you had enough of this? If so, leave. I remained unconscious for several days. Upon awakening, news of Wan Lo hiding in the Eastern Palace and injuring me had spread. Initially, the crown prince could have shielded her. However, the imperial physician revealed that I was 3 months pregnant and nearly suffered a miscarriage. Consequently, the Empress Dowager intervened,
demanding Wan Le's exécution.
After all, what was Wan Lo, a mere foster daughter, compared to a biological grandson? Years ago, the Empress Dowager had given birth to a pair of twins, yet due to the inauspicious nature of twins, the younger brother was smothered to death. Subsequently, the Empress Dowager hastily brought back a girl from her family to substitute for the second child. This girl was Wan Lo. Upon learning of her impending fate, Wan Lo wailed, clinging desperately to the Empress Dowager's leg. Yet the Empress Dowager, with her eyes closed, coldly commanded the maidservants to remove her. The crown prince clenched his fists, a look of helplessness on his face. Before he could speak, I interjected, regardless, I have not suffered any serious harm. And it seems Wan Li's actions were but an unintentional mistake, so let it be. The Empress Dowager cast a glance at me, ultimately sparing Wan Li's life, but sending her far away. The crown prince gazed at me for a long time. That night, he took out scissors, cutting a lock of his hair and binding it to mine, looking at me with profound guilt. You are such a kind-hearted, magnanimous, gentle and wise woman. I was foolish before. I am truly sorry. Shall we strive to live well from now on? I naturally replied with a smile. Have we not been living well all along? The crown prince, feeling even more remorseful, held me tightly in his embrace, as if I were a treasured possession. I smiled coldly. Since you feel sorry, then you must compensate me with something of value. 2 years passed, and the emperor fell gravely ill, bequeathing the throne to the crown prince. I was then crowned as the empress. The palace welcomed numerous beauties. The crown prince, or rather his majesty, grew increasingly distant towards me, even reminiscing about Wan Lo, who was now far away. Not long after, a frail beauty appeared in the palace. This beauty was amiable to everyone, except for me and the Empress Dowager, her gaze laced with venom. Every time she encountered me, she would feign stumbling, falling into a series of misfortunes. The emperor, filled with concern, berated me as a poisoner, lamenting that he had misjudged me, believing I should not have been made empress. The beauteous eyes sparkled with delight. Observing the two of them in a close embrace, I was reminded of the scenes from several years ago during the Eastern Palace election. Narrowing my eyes, I thought, how wonderful that you have returned. Let us perish together. Perhaps to compensate for the suffering Wan Lo endured over the years, the emperor continuously elevated her rank, and within mere months, She became the imperial noble consort. They were inseparable, displaying an exceedingly affectionate bond. Those who had wronged Wanlu met with dire fates, including the Empress Dowager, the Emperor's birth mother, who was sent to a monastery for reclusion. Meanwhile, I faced constant reprimands. It was said that the decree for my deposition lay on the desk of the Qingqian Palace. The atmosphere within the 6 palaces was tense. Some consorts sought my counsel, and I merely smiled. Soon, the harem, and indeed the entire realm, shall be purged of its darkness. On New Year's Eve, amidst a festive atmosphere, a grave misfortune befell the imperial noble consort's chambers. The emperor was found dead upon her bed. When I arrived, Wanlu clung tightly to the emperor, weeping uncontrollably. Upon seeing me, she implored for my help. I coldly brushed her hand away. The imperial noble consort has violated the virtues of womanhood, seducing the emperor to his demise. Bring forth poison. Wanlu was momentarily stunned. What nonsense are you spouting? I did not harm my brother. He merely fainted. He is not dead. Hurry. Summon the physician.
He gazed ahead, smiling.
Wretched woman. At this point, you still refuse to admit your guilt. The emperor died in your bed, and you dare to feign innocence. Do you wish for me to summon the palace maids as witnesses? Imperial noble consort, I have afforded you an opportunity. If you refuse the poison, then let it be. Bring her to me, and strangle her. Imperial noble consort, as a fellow woman, I am willing to grant you a semblance of dignity. May you cultivate yourself in your next life and refrain from becoming a malicious woman with nefarious intentions. Wanlu, with her neck arched defiantly, wore a face of fury. Yet upon hearing this, her complexion drained of color. She trembled for a long time, unable to utter a word. I know you resent me, but he is your husband, the father of your child. Do you truly not care for him? I chuckled softly, stepping out of the hall, wiping away non-existent tears. The emperor has passed away. Within the hall, curses and accusations echoed, followed by desperate cries for help, until silence fell. At dawn, I led the young prince before the ministers, surveying the assembly with an imperious gaze, exuding unparalleled nobility. No one dared to label me a harbinger of disaster any longer. No one could impose the virtues of womanhood upon me. I am a person, a woman, yet I cultivate virtue, not the so-called womanly virtues. I am a woman, and I can also be the sovereign of a dynasty, a woman who surpasses all men. The end. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to our next tale.